Hi, welcome back, everyone. It's a new week. We've got a pretty exciting topic to talk about today, which is this growing movement by corporations to sever ties with the NRA. We're going to be talking about that with one of our lead reporters here at ThinkProgress, who's been covering this story all last week as we saw a lot of dramatic developments in what is really one of the most powerful forces in American politics. And then we are going to take your questions, so go ahead and leave them in the comment box. We are monitoring them. We want to hear from you. But I want to introduce you to Kira Lerner, who's a political reporter here at ThinkProgress. You want to just introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Kira. I'm a political reporter here, like Judd said. I have been covering the NRA and the gun industry for a few years now at ThinkProgress. I've attended the NRA's annual convention for the past 3 years. I've reported on gun violence and the industry as a whole. And like Judd said, for the past week, I've been tracking this corporate ties to the NRA pretty closely, and we can get into everything that's played out in the last week. But I've been talking to the different companies that have had relationships with the NRA, that have pulled their relationships, and that have decided, at least for now, to stick with the NRA.
So, Kira, why don't you talk about this? Really started, we published our initial piece on Tuesday. We identified about 22 brands that were associated with the NRA. But before we did that, we went and we reached out to each company to sort of get to hear from them, see what they had to say. What were you hearing early in the week from these companies?
Yeah, it was interesting how quickly this changed. When we first reached out to all of the companies on Tuesday, I spoke with a number of communications professionals and customer service representatives at these companies who told me this is a program we've had for a really long time. Our NRA customers appreciate the discount. We're happy to offer it to them. We offer this discount just as we offer any other group a discount, and it's a program that we are going to maintain. And at least on Tuesday, it seemed like not much was going to change after the Parkland shooting, and they were just going to continue business as usual. And then that was kind of the status quo for 24 hours or so, and then we started to see things change a little bit.
And what was the first company that announced that they were leaving the NRA and going to sever ties?
Yeah, well, actually, first on Wednesday, we noticed that the First National Bank of Omaha, which is the largest privately held bank in the country, they took down their website that had been advertising the NRA's official Visa credit card. They had this whole designed website up for at least the last few years that advertised 2 different credit cards that NRA members could get to get different benefits at sporting goods stores and at gas stations, I think. And that website just quietly disappeared sometime on Wednesday. So we reported that that site went down. And then it wasn't until, I believe, the next morning that the bank actually issued a statement and said that this was a conscious decision and they were no longer going to offer the Visa credit card. And that kind of set in motion a lot of momentum, and from there, companies kept going.
Yeah, it's interesting how these companies, before they make the announcement, they hunker down. Because we were really wanting to hear, once we saw that site go down, we were really wanting to hear from First National Bank. And we were talking about, well, we've texted, we've emailed, we've called. Is there any other way? Can we send a smoke signal? Is there some way we can get this person to tell us what's going on? Because we knew something was happening. After First National Bank moved, how did things change after that? I mean, as far as what we were hearing from the companies, what you were hearing from the companies when you were talking to them, because some of them were sometimes we were finding out on Twitter, but some of them were talking to you directly.
Yeah, well, at that point, most of the interaction between the companies and the public was happening on Twitter. The companies were responding to customers that were complaining on Twitter and on other social media. If you looked at some of these companies' most recent tweets, they would have like thousands of responses from customers pointing out, no matter what the tweet was about, pointing out the NRA connection. And at that point, when I started reaching out to the companies, as they made their decisions to take a step back from the NRA, they were just issuing very short and to the point statements saying that we have asked the NRA to remove our information from their website. We're no longer going to have this relationship. Very few gave an explanation. They didn't want to get into why this was happening for obvious reasons. They wanted to keep this a little bit less political as much as they could in this circumstance. I did talk with one company over the weekend that pulled back, and they said, listen, we just want to sell software. This isn't a political decision, but take that as you will.
Yeah, I was surprised at how rapid the politics of that changed from Tuesday, when people had no problem with just defending the relationship, to by the end of the week, people very rapidly, just getting rid of this relationship. On Friday night, I know you and I were talking and worked together on a piece. We had noticed that actually Delta and United had offered discounts for people traveling to the NRA convention. And I heard that night from both airlines that they, in fact, this was standard contractual relationship, routine, no problems with it, went to sleep, had some breakfast, got up the next day, and all of a sudden everything had changed. They were canceling these discount programs, what was routine, less than 12 hours before they were gone. Now, we have seen overall, most of the companies that had established discount relationships for NRA members have dropped out. The 30 or so, I think we're well over 2/3 who have ended the relationships. We do see a few companies hanging on, probably the most prominent of which is FedEx, which is just getting an avalanche of criticism online. I think their most recent tweet is a very cute tweet with a dog, and people are just really laying into them in the comment section. But it looks like, for right now, FedEx has decided they're going to stand by the NRA. So we'll have to see how this plays out in the week ahead. I think there's a lot of other avenues. This is just one kind of relationship that corporations have with the NRA. There's a lot of different kinds of relationships to explore, but I know that we have some questions, so I want to make sure we save time for that. So why don't Kira and I, we could take some questions from another Kira who's off screen but has some questions for us and is going to let us know about them.
So just more broadly, can you talk about how many members the NRA has and if it's tax exempt and how?
Yeah, as far as the members, the NRA claims that they have 5 million members. That's a number they've used for a long time, and they don't update very often. So I'm not sure how that number has changed, especially in the last week since the Parkland shooting. But to be an NRA member, there's a very low bar for entry. It's a $40 annual membership fee, or you just have to subscribe to one of the NRA's magazines. They have a number of political or sporting magazines. So there's definitely a degree in how active members are. A small percentage of them go to the annual meeting, and there's far more that are just members for maybe for the discounts and benefits.
Yeah, it's about 80,000, I think, at the annual meeting. Mm-hmm. And as far as the tax-exempt status, that's something that is pretty widely available to anyone that even has a partial educational purpose. So they're educating people about guns. I think there's a lot of people who think, well, maybe the information that they're sharing about guns isn't as accurate as it could be. How is this a educational purpose? But the IRS really isn't in the business of saying, well, this is accurate educational information and this isn't. They're just looking broadly at it. They have a range of activities. Some of it is not through a tax-exempt entity. They engage in a lot of political activity as well. So I think broadly they are tax-exempt, but there's a lot of different arms that are organized in different ways.
So for all the companies that we know are supporting the NRA, why do you think they do work with the NRA in the first place?
Do you want to take that, Kira?
Yeah, I mean, I think like they told me, they offered discounts and benefits to a lot of different companies, and for them it was just a business and a financial decision if they would get more customers if, like, say, a rental car company would get gun-owning customers to use their service by offering them a small discount. The financial cost-benefit analysis probably weighed to the fact that they would support gun owners as well, just like any other organization.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons we saw this particular corporate relationship end so quickly, was that it was really about money. And so they have some number of active members. They can offer this discount. If you're a rental car company and you're offering 10% off, they offer 10% off in a lot of different circumstances, and they're still making a good amount of money. So it was all positive. When they then saw the reaction on social media, all of this negative publicity, I think it became a relatively easy decision for them to say, this isn't worth it for us anymore. Now, previously, I think they would have been loath to terminate the relationship because it was not the opposition to the NRA, but the NRA members themselves who were seen as the most powerful political force. And that's really what has changed, is that now people are looking at the NRA on one side and the emerging momentum led by a lot of these students who I think are inspiring a lot of other people to speak out and take action. That is changing that calculus for corporations. And what I'm tracking, and I think what we're going to be looking at here at ThinkProgress, is how far down the chain does this go? This is basically, it's a very public corporate relationship, but it's level one. And how far down does this start to create problems for the NRA, who has a lot of different activities?
Sure. And I think on that note, social media has really changed the way that corporations have to interact with their customers. And before Twitter, FedEx maybe they would get some calls from angry customers, but for the most part, they could probably get away with something like this pretty easily. But now I'm sure that there are a lot of employees at FedEx who are dealing with this constantly just because of how prominent it is on social media.
And if you're out there, employees at FedEx, and you'd like to speak with us, Kira is available all day. She's very easy to get in touch with. Just look her up on Twitter.
Speaking of FedEx, Diane Howard wants to know, why do you think FedEx is willing to take the bad PR, and why don't most NRA members understand that the organization is mainly a marketing arm of gun manufacturers?
Yeah, I think those two questions are related. That FedEx's relationship with the NRA is more rigorous and has more depth than maybe these car companies or some of the other companies you saw drop. They ship a lot of guns, which is something that can be expensive. I'm sure there's all sorts of things. I haven't personally shipped a lot of guns, but I can imagine that you probably have to take some precautions when you're shipping guns. And the FedEx relationship is on the business side. If as a business, and a lot of the businesses that kind of join their business alliance are in the gun business, FedEx then will offer a discount to those companies, and those companies will then ship all of their guns through FedEx. So I think on the one hand, there's more money involved for FedEx in this, and then I think they're probably worried if they drop this discount, they're going to lose a lot of their gun business. How big is their gun business? I don't know. They're a $60 billion company on an annual basis, so I'm not sure how much guns could possibly account for that, but I think it's much more substantial than, say, how much Hertz relies on their NRA discount for rental cars. I think the second thing that comes into play here is corporate culture. You have Fred Smith, who's the CEO, I think, who's viewed as a more conservative force, probably less swayed by emerging political winds. And I think there is a calculation, and this is typically what companies do. What we saw over the last week by most companies, that's unusual. That's not the typical thing you see. I think companies say to themselves, you know what, this is going to blow over. We'll take 3 or 4 days of some hits, and then things will return to normal. Our social media guru will have a bad week or two, but after that, we'll get back to business. And I think that's the calculation FedEx has taken, and they could be right or they could be wrong. I think we're in uncharted waters, and we're going to have to see how it plays out. You would think that at a certain point, they may decide that this isn't worth it, but we haven't reached that point yet. Yeah.
One more question for you. What's the deal with the NRA's grading system for members of Congress?
So the NRA, one of their biggest political political activities is that they grade members of Congress on a A to F scale based on how friendly they are to the gun lobby, and they mostly use it as a way for Republicans to be able to tout their A rating, or for Democrats to be able to campaign and say, listen, the NRA gave me an F rating, I'm on the side of gun control groups. And I believe that the NRA updates their rating for lawmakers as different legislation goes up for a vote. So it's kind of a way to intimidate lawmakers into staying on the right side of this policies that are moving forward.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I've seen is you've seen some politicians go on Twitter and start advertising their F rating from the NRA, and the fact that they've never received any donations from the NRA as a way to kind of generate some positive feedback. So that's again the shifting political winds. So I think that what I'm being told by the friendly people that help us put this on is that we've run out of time. But let us know how you like this new format. You can leave a comment. I'm going to bring someone back next week, maybe Kira, maybe someone else. Kira will be back, that's for sure. And we'll see you back here next Monday. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.